I'm Poul, as Lars said, and I work for Retest Security as a senior cybersecurity consultant. I do a bit of everything. I do web application testing, I do application testing, and I also do assume reach. Today I'm going to be talking about the most common misconfigurations I see on a AD domain and how to fix them. The agenda is pretty simple for today. First we're going to talk about a little bit of introduction of AD in general, then the common attack vectors that we're seeing in the wild, or like we're actually doing at customers. Then some words of conclusion. If you have questions, the end would probably be the best time to ask them. So a little bit of introduction. Some words on Active Directory. As you probably all know, Active Directory is a solution to manage Windows infrastructure for organizations. So you manage a lot of things: computers, users, authentication, and so on and so forth. And you of course manage the security of your organization through Active Directory. Now this talk is going to focus on on-prem environments. And when you're attacked on an on-prem environment, the things attackers will go for always is something called domain admin, which is basically the keys to the kingdom of the domain. If you get a domain administrator access as an attacker, you get everything from the domain. You get server access, you get credentials, you can impersonate any user, you can do anything you want if you get this DA, domain admin access. So as an attacker, the different phases go like this. First do initial compromise. So initial compromise is, for example, phishing. If someone sends a phishing email to someone in your organization and then someone open it, then probably the attacker will receive a command prompt and will be able to do stuff on your domain. That's initial compromise. Then you move to recon. Recon is when you're inside of the domain and you're seeing what's happening around. You're like looking at which servers you have access to, etc., etc. And from there, you want to do pivoting. So you want to move from server to server, from workstation to workstation, until you find something that's interesting, until you find maybe credentials lying on a share, maybe a DA access lying on a share, whatever. You try to find that. And privilege escalation is the last phase, when you actually want to use the credentials you found and hopefully, for an attacker, get that golden goose of domain admin. So now I'm going to talk about these common attack vectors and how we usually attack organizations to demonstrate the potential vulnerabilities. What we usually do are assume breach tests. So in assume breach tests, the reason why it's bold is because in assume breach tests we mostly do recon, pivoting, and privilege escalation. Now in this talk, I'm going to be mostly focusing on pivoting and privilege escalation because it's the thing that you can defend against most. And we're not really going to talk about initial compromise, because initial compromise is something that can take months and it doesn't bring a lot of value to the organization. So that's why it says your best bang for your buck, because while doing an assume breach, you don't spend like a month paying a consultant trying to get into your organization, and you'll get literally no value out of this because someone will click on that phishing email at some point. So what you're interested in is checking what they can do after they got in the account of Bob from finance, and this is what the talk is going to focus about. So these common attack vectors are going to be ranked roughly by how easy it is to carry out. So the first ones are going to be fairly easy, and then at the end we're going to move into more technical stuff. Now the first one is not really an attack vector. It's more something that's often overlooked in organization. I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about it. It's the case of local admin. So in a lot of organizations, what we see is that there's some people who want to be local administrators, like developers, for example. I'm a developer. It's important for me to have this local admin access. The problem is, if you give local admin access to anyone or everyone in your organization, you expose yourself to a lot of problems. So, for example, the first thing, something we see a lot, is credential theft or credential dumping. When you have local admin access, you can dump credentials, meaning access credentials of users that logged into your system previously. So for example, if I'm Bob from finance, I have a problem with my laptop, I go to IT. IT says, okay, well, I can fix it, I just need to log in with my IT credentials, maybe domain admin credentials, who knows, sometimes it happens. I have to log into your computer, I'm going to fix the problem. They do it, they fix the problem, they ship the laptop back to Bob, if Bob is a local admin, they have their credentials, and they can then use them to, well, become domain admin if the IT guy is a domain admin. And then all of a sudden, you came from, Bob from finance who has access to the finance shares to an IT person who has access to all the IT shares, which is a problem, of course. There are several credentials you can dub and TLM hashes. So a hash is an imprint of a password that you can crack offline. You can also pass this one, but it's not. You cannot pass all the hashes. You cannot just take a hash and say, "Hey, it's my hash. It's my hash. Authenticate me with that." It's not going to work with all the hashes. There's something called network access account that you might, if you know, you might have encountered. You use it. If there's a machine that's not domain joined but still needs updates, you use the network access account. Now, if you're a local admin and the network access account logged into your machine, you can have the credentials in plain text. So an attacker will have username and password of network access account for free, basically, if they're a local admin. And you can also dump cached Kerberos tickets, so that's what you can see here. It's heavily redacted, as you can see. It's not really interesting anymore so much, but you can see IDs here. Here that would be username, so bob-finance whatever at domain.com. And here it's the service, so it could be shares or authentication services or whatnot. And here it's the end time, so what you need to know is the Kerberos tickets. They're a way to authenticate users on the domain. So if you're a user, you say, "Hey, here's my ticket. I am Bob from finance. Look, because the authority said I was, so you know I'm Bob from finance." Now, when you steal those tickets, they have a limited duration. So in my example, it worked very well because Bob from finance just gave their laptop to IT, and IT just logged in. So 8 hours later, the ticket is still there. But they do expire. If you're a local admin, you can also do a bunch of cool stuff like disable the antivirus, which is invaluable, especially for a consultant, because what I think is attackers will be able to circumvent the antivirus given time, but when you're a consultant and you have 5 days, you don't have that kind of time. You're not going to spend like a month saying, "Well, I can bypass the AV, don't worry. Just give me 5 more days, 5 more minutes." You don't have that kind of time. So if you're a local admin, it saves you a lot of time. Sometimes we also do ask our customers to disable the AV. If we know for sure there's a security vulnerability, we're going to be able to exploit. But usually we don't really need to. Finally, if you're a local admin, you can perform process injection, which is basically if a user is running a process, you can impersonate them via some voodoo token impersonation techniques. In general, getting this local admin is invaluable for an attacker. That's why, even though you think your organization has a lot of protections and everything, it's a very good idea to really, really make sure people with local admin access need that local admin access. Now we're going to move on to, this was a bit technical, we're going to move on to the first attack, which is a bit less technical, but it's a thing we see. All of these things I'm showing you, it's things we see like all the time. Like last week I saw one of these. 2 weeks ago I did. Like, every week we see something like that. It's crazy. Passwords and shares, the best examples. We will always, when we look for in file shares, we'll always find plain text passwords just lying around. Usually it's in the IT share. You would have deployment scripts with username, password, sometimes domain admin username, passwords. It's rarer and rarer, but we do see them. An old deployment script from 10 years ago, someone forgot about it, bam, suddenly it's there. It is a lot in the IT share, but sometimes we also see database passwords. And a lot of people are like, well, it's a database password. So worst case scenario, they just access the database, but it's not a problem for the domain. The problem is if you're running SQL Server, which most of you do, I guess, if you use Microsoft products, there's something called XP-CMD shell, which is an extension of the SQL language that allows an attacker to run code from a SQL database user. So now you went from, yeah, he can just dump the database to he has access to the server. And the neat things with SQL Server users is that they can escalate privileges to local admin pretty easily. So you went from, yeah, it's just a database password, to it's a password to run code on a SQL server that can dump credentials, and there's a lot of traffic on SQL servers because admin logs in, they have to do maintenance and stuff. And then suddenly you went from, yeah, it's just a database password to I got compromised, the domain admin is compromised, which we all agree isn't great. Now there's also something else that's pretty important, that's also often overlooked, read-write privileges. Sometimes you have shares that have that with people, normal, regular users have write privileges on. For example, IT shares, if you share programs For example, 7-zip, you have a share with 7-zip on it. If someone has write access to it, they can change 7-zip to put a backdoor in it, and then all the users starting 7-zip suddenly are compromised by the attacker, and that's what you get if you have write privileges on the wrong shares. So what I urge you to do is basically go home and create a regular user, and that regular, like as in you add a user from finance or department that's not IT, and then you check what access they have by default. There are some tools to help you with that. And basically what's important here is you make sure there's no overly privileged access to shares. Now the second thing, same, still passwords. It's always about passwords one way or another. Weak passwords on the domain. Now there's an attack, well-known attack. It's called brute force. When you have a user, you submit 1,000, 2,000, 1,000,000 passwords to that user. Problem is, if you're you're using Active Directory authentication, you're going to have a lockout policy. After 10 trials, the user is going to be, or like 3, 5, whatever it is in your domain, the user is going to be locked out. Now there's another technique, which is called password spraying, which is trying one password for all the users. Now you're going to have a high chance to get a password like that, because there will be a user who uses summer 2024, winter 2024, company name 2024, exclamation mark, etc. Now if you have it, don't raise your hand. No, just go home and change it. One of your users will have this. I guarantee you we get like a lot of success there. Now it might not give you domain admin for sure, but it will give you some other privileges for other servers that your user might not have access to. And now you went from a normal finance user to a slightly more technical IT help desk user who has slightly more access. And that's your way to potentially DA. One way to protect you from that, well, now it sounds like a Microsoft salesman, but it is a nice solution. It's Microsoft Entra ID password protection, which works for both Azure and on-prem solutions. Basically, it prevents users from using a list, like well-known passwords that are in a list. So, for instance, let's say you have a very strong password policy. You might have a strong password policy. Let's say 11 characters, uppercase, lowercase, special characters. If you think about it, the password retest 2024 exclamation mark, it's 11 character, retest, R-E-T-E-S-T 2024 exclamation mark. It's 11 characters, it's special characters, uppercase, lowercase, it has everything, still it's a weak password. So this allows you to basically blacklist these easy passwords so that the users don't have them. This is something I also would highly recommend. Now we're moving in a bit more technical realm, but it is something that's also important, something called Kerber roasting. If you have a service account, you have service accounts that run SQL servers and whatnots. Now these service accounts it's just regular user accounts, but they also need something called an SPN tied to them, or service principal name tied to them, to make the service work. Now these service accounts, by default, they have very strong passwords. They have like 20 characters, uppercase, lowercase, whatever. They're randomly generated. You're not going to crack them in 1,000 years with the current technology. And that's also why when you're a user on the domain, you can query the password hash, Kerberos password hash of all of these service accounts. It's not a problem because you can't pass the hash. The only thing you can do is crack it. And as I just told you, you can't crack them because they're really, really strong. The problem comes when you have Bob, our good old friend Bob from finance, who wants to install a SQL server and says, oh, can I have like a little bit of more privileged account? I want to like install my custom SQL server. I need it for, I don't know, for my data. I would really need it. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to create you like an SPN. You're going to be able to run the SQL server. It's all fine and dandy. But the problem is Bob from finance didn't see this talk and has summer 2024 exclamation mark as a password. Now it's in the list because if you try to crack the password, you have a list. You probably will have a list of millions of passwords you're trying, and it's really fast. As you can see here, this is a little excerpt of a cracking tool that cracks a password. As you can see, we tried 33 million passwords in 13 seconds. And out of the 27 passwords we tried to crack, 11 were cracked. And it's a small dictionary. Usually you can run this for hours and hours and hours on bigger dictionaries. Now this is a real life case that happened on a customer. So this is something that's not just theoretical. Attackers will do that because it's one of the first things you do when you enter a domain. Now the only way to prevent that is to review all accounts with an SPN configured and see if it's Bob from finance or it's an actual service, SQL service or whatever. That's something that's also really important. Now we're going to move a little bit away from passwords, and we're going to talk about AD permissions. There's a saying, when you're an attacker, it's sysadmins reason with lists and attackers with groups. It means that when you're a sysadmin and you look for a user in the AD environment, what you're going to look for, when you look at their groups, you're just going to see the list of their primary groups. So you're going to see they're members of SQL, SQL Server admins, SQL Server users, VPN, Denmark, Copenhagen office, these kind of groups. What you don't see is which subgroups these groups are part of. So for maybe SQL users are members, SQL Server admins are member of IT maintenance, and maybe 10 years ago someone decided IT maintenance should also be domain admin. Now it's a very simple example, of course, but this is something we see all the time. Non-trivial paths that are exploited, because when you're an admin, this is not like a view you're presented with, but when you're an attacker, this is definitely something you want to see. Now, these are a few tools that are used by attackers. You probably heard about them to automate that. Bloodhound for on-prem and Surehound for Sure environments. It looks like this. It's not that complicated, actually. If you see here, we compromised Alice. Now, they're a member of the support group. Support group is a member of IT support. And these IT support are admin of this client, this computer. Now, Bob, he has a session on that computer, as we can see here. He has a session on that computer, and Bob is also a member of domain admins. Now, as we saw, Alice is a member of is an admin of client 2 by their privileges. Now, since they're a member of admins, since they're admins to this, as we saw earlier, they can dump passwords. So now you went from Alice from IT support or support to Alice, the domain admin, because they compromised Bob. That's the kind of attacks we see, and that's why it's usually a good idea to review this kind of attack path. Now, last but not least, this is the most technical, but then after that, I promise I'm done with the technicalities or the technical stuff. But it is also something really important. This is the Active Directory Certificate Service, or IDCS. It's a thing we exploit a lot because it's very stealthy, and it's very easy to get wrong when you're an administrator trying to get it right. As you can see, there's 13 different scenarios that are exploitable, and the way it works is by exploiting a certificate template. So now a certificate is is an item. It can be a file. It usually is a file that proves that someone or something is what the certificate says. So in my certificate, there might be written, this is Bob from admin, and a certificate authority guaranteed that it is Bob from admin or from finance. Or it can also say this is the server you're accessing. Like google.com, you have a certificate that says it really is google.com because someone verified it for you. Now, in ADCS, so the certificate service, you have certificate templates, which are used to generate certificates. As you can see, there's 13 different scenarios. We're not going to list them one by one, but just to make you understand like how serious it can be, there's ESC1, which is the first vulnerability that can be used to become a domain administrator from a regular user point of view. For that, you need three things. You need a certificate template that can be used to generate certificates to authenticate. So basically, from a certificate template, you need to be able to generate a file that says, I want to authenticate with that file. You need to be able to specify the name of the object the certificate identifies yourself. So you need to be able to say, this certificate identifies Bob from domain admins. And finally, you need to be able to request a certificate as a normal user. If you have these three, as a normal user, I can ask the ADCS to give me a ticket or a certificate that says I'm a domain admin, and I can then use that, pass it around, say, yeah, I'm a domain admin, please, like, take a look, it's certified, it's valid 5 years, and it was one request or two requests to the ADCS to request that, and then it's valid for 5 years, unless it's revoked. So now it's very stealthy, because you need 2 or 3 commands to run it, and you're also exploiting something very legitimate, because you're just generating a certificate, and the service is made for generating certificates. Of course, EDR will probably catch it because you want to generate a certificate from a normal user to authenticate a domain administrator, which is not super legit. But we have a lot of times where we had customers and they come to us and they say, yeah, well, it's been 40 minutes. You used to have like thousands and thousands of tries of password by minute, and now there's nothing. Why are you still working, or are you just snapping? And we're like, well, we're domain admin. We're just double checking, but we're domain admin. And they don't see it because it's again, it's stealthier than the other methods. Now, some honorable mentions. I'm going to go very fast because we don't have time, and it's also some of them are technical. There are some relay attacks where you take some credentials from someone else on the wire and relay them to other places. PXE image, if you use them, you know it's something you use to set up computers, and sometimes they have passwords in them that you can extract. And the three, we talked about it already. So in conclusion, all of these, what I presented, these are low-hanging fruits. It's not like crazy attacks that it's something we do every assignment. This is the standard things we try, and then we try a bit more stuff as presented before. This is something any attacker will try on your domain, including spraying summer 2024 and winter 2024. This will happen for sure. And don't think just because you have on-prem and a hybrid environment with on-prem and Azure, and your on-prem is very small and the Azure is very big, you're safe, because when you're a domain admin, you can also become a global admin fairly easily, depending on the configuration. It's a thing to escalate from one to the other. Now, thanks for your attention. Yeah, stay safe out there. Feel free to reach out. And if you have any questions, I think you can ask them now, or just send me an email.
So there must be some questions. Nope.
Nope.
Yeah.
We do, but the problem
Could you
with
repeat the question?
the question is, do we have tools, I think, to prevent these? We do, but the problem is, tool is only as good as the person who uses it. So then there's, if I would give tools, which I can, if you shoot me an email, or I think we have also blog posts on that. But the problem is, then you're going to have this full sense of security, because you're going to be, oh, I run the tools, I'm all fine. But then someone else with maybe a bit more experience would know that actually you're not fine, because vulnerability 14 came out today, and then all of a sudden you're vulnerable again. So yeah, in that case, I would recommend just contact us or another company or something. Well, don't contact another company, because Tim is looking. Don't. We're the best in the business. Yes?
Does that work with just the IP protection you have?
Yeah.
Repeat the question, please.
Oh, what the question was, if it works with?
Yeah, if it works with IP protection or just network protection.
If it works with network protection? Yeah. I think so.
So location specific.
Well, assume breach comes from you being on the network already, so it would defeat the IP protection, right? Because you would already be there. So.
We only have one location, that's why.
Because what you would do, for example, in initial compromise is send an email to someone, and then they would click on the link, and then you would be contacted back, but you would still be on site theoretically, because you would have compromised the client that's on site, right? So then everything would still be game. Everything would still work.
We got time for more questions. Yeah.
So, apart from the certificate problem, a lot of the strategies you talked about were about passwords. And I think most people here know that we should probably try to get away from password-only as security, because that sucks. But typically, password is still your fallback if your other strategies, Windows and other stuff, are failing. Can that be mitigated somehow?
Can you repeat that question?
No, but can you repeat the question?
Let's try again. So, passwords only is shitty security. We want users to use Windows Hello, Microsoft Authenticator, all sorts of
Yeah.
combined or some other login thing. But typically, if your Windows Hello fails and if something else fails, your fallback will be, okay, but if you know your domain password, you can still log in.
Right.
Can this be mitigated in the current Microsoft stack?
I'm not a blue team expert, so I'm definitely not going to maybe not give you the best answer, but the only thing I can tell is your best bet is probably to just move away from passwords and try to make your users use passphrases instead. This is the thing that I've been hearing the most lately. just move away from passwords. And I mean, you know, instead of having a 14 like with characters and 14 digits password with like characters and everything, have phrases like, you know, the horse runs around the field or something.
Battery. Like
Exactly, something like that, something with the horse. I use phrases, sentences instead of passwords. I think that's your best bet, honestly, right now.
Thank you. So, thank you very much, Paul. So the point of this presentation was to, first of all, prepare you for something you're going to hear later, which is the assumed breach that we've been running on Horten, advokatselskabet Horten. So these are some of the things that they have been doing as a part of that test. We'll get back to that. So remember some of the things you heard here. And second of all, I think it's also, I mean, feel comfortable with the food and feel comfortable with that, but not with IT. So that's how it works. These two guys have a question?
Just last week we did another assumed breach test for another client, and we had two guys on that one, and they managed to bypass their MFA as well, which the client was quite surprised to see. So, and I'm not even sure Paul knows how they did it, because he was on it. So, he was on another job. So, but yeah, it's just that's also an issue sometimes.
Yeah. Never feel secure. I asked you one thing, Paul, when we did the run on this. I remember that question was how many of this audience here, of all these fine gentlemen, how many of them can you actually get domain admin privileges on?
You didn't ask it that way. It wasn't personal, that personal, but I would say the same answer is still 80% probably of the
80%.
audience.
And that was on 2 days, right?
5 days.
5 days.
4 days. 4 days.
4
4
days.
days.
So maybe you're one of the 80%. Thanks, Paul, a lot for your presentation.
Thank you guys for your attention.